It's 8:30. Half past 8.
It's 8:30 New York time. Time to wake up, America, and stump the experts. Each week at this time, Lucky Strike invites you to a nationwide quiz and conversation party. Here's how it goes. You furnish the questions, and our experts try to answer them. For every question used, Lucky Strike will reward you with $10 in defense stamps. If the question is muffed, you get a total of a $50 defense bond plus the 24-volume set of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Send your questions to Information Please, 480 Lexington Avenue, New York City. If our editorial staff edits your questions a bit, don't fret over it. In case of similarity, we'll have to be sole judge of who shall be paid. And all questions become the property of Information Please. And now light up a Lucky Strike as I present our Master of Ceremonies, book reviewer of the New Yorker magazine, Clifton Fadiman. Mr. Fadiman.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, Information Please, as always, is completely unprepared and unrehearsed. Our panel of experts includes our three regulars, Franklin P. Adams, Oscar Levant, and John Kieran, and as our guest of honor, the famous author Emil Ludwig, whose recent book, Bolivar, has been highly praised. Now we're going to begin with a question from R. Kessler Searles of Mount Vernon, New York. Get 3 out of 4 on this if you can. It's about certain circumstances under which certain things were opened to release or admit other things. For example, what was opened to release all the ills of the world? Mr. Ludwig.
The Pandora.
Yes, not Pandora.
What do you call it?
The box.
The box,
Box of
yes,
Pandora.
the box of Pandora. What caused Pandora to open the box, Mr. Ludwig? Why did she do it?
Well, it's a terrible story. But I
It's
don't
terrible.
tell
Don't
it.
want to tell it?
Curiosity.
Just plain curiosity, yes, and gave us all the ills of the world.
If she hadn't done it, somebody else would have.
I suppose so. Now, what was opened to release the dangerous winds of the world? The winds of the world, Mr. Kieran.
Well, the cave of Wallace was king of the winds. He opened the cave.
Well, you've got the right man, I think. But what actually was opened that from which the winds were released? Was it the cave or was it the bag in which the winds were confined?
Well, it's a cave in Virgil's Aeneid.
I thought it was a bag in which these 4 winds were confined.
It's been a bag lately.
I don't know. At any rate, it was the crew of Ulysses who untied these winds, and that Aeolus had bidden them not untie. Now, how about something that was open to admit the beasts of the world, or to release all the beasts of the world? Mr. Kieran.
The Ark, Noah's Ark.
Yes, Noah's Ark, quite right. And what was open to admit a concealed foe, an enemy, a disguised enemy? Mr. Adams.
A wooden horse.
Yes, and under what circumstances?
Siege of Troy.
Under the siege of Troy, the famous Trojan horse.
Also, a jackpot is frequently opened under such conditions.
Mr. Levant, did you have another answer for that one?
In a succinct way, I was going to say the Trojan horse.
The Trojan horse. Very good. Well, that was rather easy. Now, let's see if we can get a little more difficult question. Here's one from Dr. C.D. Larson of Bethesda, Maryland. Get 3 out of 4 again. Who was the first president of each of these countries? The first president of Czechoslovakia. Mr. Ludwig.
Masaryk.
Masaryk,
The best man
yes.
we had.
Pardon?
The best man we had in Europe.
And we're going to have others just as good in the future. Now, that date of Masaryk's assumption of the presidency was what? When did he come?
18.
In 18, yes. The first president of Colombia. The first president of Colombia. Mr.
Nicholas Murray Butler.
He's a present president.
He's not merely the present president, but probably permanent president.
He always
Mr.
was.
Adams. That isn't the Colombia I meant.
It's hard to get in.
I meant Colombia, yes, Mr. Adams, thank you. The South American country of Colombia had as its first president whom? Colombia's first president?
Colombia.
No.
Simon Bolivar.
Simon Bolivar is right, yes.
Bolivar.
Bolivar.
Do you have to say Bolivar, Mr.
Bolivar or not?
I don't think we're ever going to get used to saying Bolivar up here, Mr. Ludwig and Mr. Kieran. Bolivar, we say. In 1819, yes, was the first president of Colombia. Mr. Ludwig was too modest to answer that question. I knew he knew the answer. The first president of Turkey. First president of Turkey. Mr. Kieran.
Mustafa Kemal.
How do you suppose we pronounce that, Mr.
Kemal.
Kieran? Kemal? Yeah. Can't you make Mr.
The
Kieran
Kemals
wrong,
are
Mr.
coming.
Ludwig? Yes, Mustafa Kemal. He was given another name. Remember the name he was given later on?
Yeah.
Ataturk.
Ataturk.
right.
What does it mean, Mr. Ludwig?
The strong
Yes,
man.
well, I think head Turk.
Yeah.
Number one Turk, as it were. Now, the first president of the Philippine Islands, gentlemen, was who? Mr. Kieran.
Well, I think it's Manuel Quezon.
Yes, elected in 1935. Well, that gives us 4 presidents out of 4. Now, how about this one from Mrs. H.F. Jurgen of Upper Montclair, New Jersey? This is a musical question. You're going to hear 3 musical selections. I want you to identify for us the composer of them and the person who was honored in each of them, in whose honor this selection was composed. Let's have the first. I have 2 hands. Mr. Ludwig?
Mhm.
Who was the composer of it?
That's the March of the Eroica.
Yes, well, you say that as if it were obvious to everybody, but it isn't obvious to me.
That's the story of Napoleon.
Yes, it was in honor of Napoleon. Mr. Levant had his hand up and was no doubt going to say the same thing. Mr. Levant, is it true that the Eroica was composed to honor Napoleon? Is there some question about that?
Well, he originally had the name on the manuscript, and he scratched it out after Napoleon betrayed ideologically what
Yeah.
Beethoven thought he was. But I don't see that it answers anything.
You mean Mr. Ludwig?
It was not actually dedicated to Napoleon.
No, but it began, when he first composed it, he did intend to honor Napoleon with it. At least that's the story. Mr. Ludwig?
It was in a certain sense dedicated because he wrote in Italian, Buonaparte, Luigi da Beethoven.
That's enough
That's
for
a
me.
dedication.
That settles it as far as I'm concerned. All right, listen to the next musical selection and identify for us the composer and the person who was honored in it. Mr. Levant had his hand
That's
up from the
beautiful.
second note.
That's by Ravel.
Right. What's the selection
It's a
called?
minuet.
Yes, and the selection
From the
was called...
Tombeau de Couperin?
From the Tombeau de Couperin, yes. Who
Actually, it was
Couperin?
dedicated to one of the soldiers. There are 7, I think, pieces, I'm not sure, in the suite. And each piece is dedicated to a fallen French soldier, a contemporary of the last war of Ravel's. The Entente suite is not dedicated to Couperin. It's in the style of Couperin.
Oh, it is not intended to honor Couperin, then?
No, I think it's the French tribute to the essence of French music, which Couperin and others represented of an early period.
Thank
But
you,
the
Mr.
pieces individually were dedicated to soldiers.
That's a perfect answer, thank you. Now, how about the third and last of these musical selections? I get a blank look from... no, I don't. I get... how about Mr. Kieran on this?
Franklin D. Roosevelt Jones.
Yes, there isn't much question as to who's being honored there. Right. Now, the next question comes from Francis McGuire of Brooklyn, New York, and it's about famous knights. This is K-N-I-G-H-T-S, knights. Who were these knights? The first is the Knight of the Rueful Countenance, the Knight of the Rueful Countenance. Who was that?
Mr. Ludwig doesn't know what rueful means.
Well,
I
rueful,
can help it to use it
Mr.
too.
Ludwig, I'll tell you what rueful means. It means sorrowful or melancholy.
Tristan.
No, he was a sad knight, that's true, but that's not the one I mean. It's Don Quixote, Don Quixote. Sometimes it's translated as Knight of the Woeful Figure, but rueful countenance is the description generally given to him. Now, here's another. The Knight of the Swan. The Knight of the Swan. Mr. Levant.
Lohengrin.
Lohengrin, yes. And a very parfait, gentle knight. Who was that?
Parfait?
Parfait is right.
Ice cream?
Not in this case. Mr. Adams?
Probably it was either Galahad or Lancelot.
Or Parsifal.
No, this is a specific knight, and I've quoted the exact
The
word.
knight in Chaucer.
We should said that first, Mr. Adams, because that's quite right. I'll have to count it wrong, because you gave us the wrong answer first. Yes, it's Chaucer's knight, as described in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, a very parfait, gentile knight. And the word gentil, G-E-N-T-I-L, what does that mean, used in Chaucer's language?
Kind.
I think something more specific than that. I think it means of high-born.
Gentle blood.
Yes, of gentle blood, meaning of a good lineage. That gives us 2 wrong and sends a $50 defense bond to Miss McGuire and a set of the Britannica. How about this one from Mary Kersey of this city? Now, we all listened on Washington's birthday to President Roosevelt's speech. In this speech, the president mentioned 4 main lines of communications, and he also mentioned 4 freedoms. And I think he wanted us to understand by that the 4 freedoms can only be achieved by keeping the 4 lines of communication open. Now, what are the 4 main lines of communications? Mr. Levant.
First, I'll do the southwest line, which is from lower Southern California to Australia. That's one line.
That would be the
The southwest line, South Pacific.
Yes, quite right.
You want some more? Let
I'd
Mr.
like
Kieran take it.
3 more. Mr.
Well,
Kieran,
it's,
take it up.
From here northeast to England, another would be
Yes, so let's call that the North Atlantic,
North Atlantic.
shall we?
Then there is the 2 ways in the South Atlantic, one around the Straits of Magellan and the other around the Cape of Good Hope.
Well, one would be the South Atlantic, and the other would be the, through what ocean?
Well, you would go around into the Indian
Into
Ocean.
the Indian Ocean, yes. That would be the 4th line of communication. The North Atlantic lane, the South Atlantic lane, the Indian Ocean, and the South Pacific. Now, the 4 freedoms for which the United Nations are fighting, we should know those by heart. The 4 freedoms. Mr. Adams.
Press,
I think not press. though
religion?
perhaps, religion is one.
Speech is another.
Speech is another.
The
Speech-
choice of religion, I think.
Pardon?
Religion, but it's phrased so that you can choose your religion.
Yes,
If you don't have one.
complete freedom of religion, and
Yeah.
freedom of speech gives us 2 of the 4 freedoms, and the other 2, which are not included in our Bill of Rights, but which
Freedom
are perhaps
from
implicit.
something.
Freedom
Freedom
from
from,
what?
Fear.
fear.
From fear and freedom from, gentlemen, we should get
Want,
this.
Want.
Want is
Want.
right, yes. Freedom from want and freedom from fear. Now, the next question comes from Sally Weissman of Webster, Massachusetts. Get 3 out of 4 on this. Suppose, gentlemen, that you were serving a full dinner, and you wanted your guests to drink all of the following wines that I'll mention. With which course would you serve each wine? Now, the first wine is claret. With what course would you serve claret, Mr. Ludwig?
To the meat, to the roast beef.
Yes, that's quite right. With the roast,
With spaghetti, too.
with spaghetti, if spaghetti is a course. Sure. And how about dry sherry? What would you serve dry sherry with, Mr. Levant?
If you want to make a guest sleepy, you always give them dry sherry. I would do it before dinner.
Yes,
Yeah,
you
you
could
can have
serve
it
sherry
before
before dinner,
Yeah.
but if you were serving it with the dinner, what course would, Mr. Adams?
Probably with the soup.
With the soup. Yes, quite right. Now, how about
You can have it in the soup, too.
you can have it in the soup if it's turtle soup? How about chablis? Chablis, Mr. Kieran.
I'd serve that with the fish slightly chilled. Not the fish.
What is chablis?
white wine.
It's a white wine. Comes from, or did come from, what country?
Well, I think that Chablis comes from Burgundy.
Yes, it's in the Burgundy
white
region of-
Burgundy.
Of France. That's quite right. A very dry.
Some are not dry enough.
Some are
Some are
not dry
not-
enough, then they're not Chablis. They're just Chablis under that under a
Chablis
similar
Gentile.
label. How about now we come to port? Port. What would you serve port with, Mr. Ludwig?
I would serve it to the sweets on the end.
Yes, I think most of us would, with the dessert at the end, Mr.
Or the
Kieran.
cheese.
Or sometimes the cheese. I think probably you'd serve
In
a
England,
Burgundy.
it's cheese.
It's in every English story, too. And they always get gout.
Generally, yeah. Or you could serve the port with nuts and fruit sometimes at the end
You
of the
can
dinner
throw it
with the
away,
dessert,
too.
generally. Now, so far, Lucky Strike has paid out one $50 defense bond and 1 set of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Now, Mr. Cross points out that the things you know about tobacco are much too useful to file and forget.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you know as well as anyone that in a cigarette, it's the tobacco that counts. But in actually choosing a cigarette, do you stop to think of tobacco? If not, you may be missing out on a lot of real smoking enjoyment. For mildness and better taste depend on fine tobacco. That's why Lucky Strike consistently pays the price to get the finer leaf at market after market, year after year. For example, at auctions in Williamston, North Carolina, season of 1939, the American Tobacco Company paid 29% more for the tobacco it bought for its cigarettes and other tobacco products. Yes, 29% above the average market price published by the United States Department of Agriculture. And that crop, properly aged, mellowed, and blended with other fine crops, is in the Luckies you buy today. Mr. Fadiman, aren't facts like these worth every smoker's attention?
Mr. Cross, the facts speak for themselves, and I timed you at just 58 seconds. Now, how about a question from Mrs. R.T. Parsons of New Madison, Ohio? I'm going to give